Thank you for your invitation. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. The following pages will describe the contributions of Vito Volterra as a leader of the Italian School of Mathematics and of the mathematicians Tullio Levi-Civita, Federico Enriquez, and Guido Castelnuovo to research policies in Italy before and after the First World War. The Italian mathematicians were in the front lines of the process to weld the country into a nation with infrastructures, standard of living, agricultural and industrial economy as close as possible to the more developed European states. Their common worldview was that scientific and technological progress would nurture and accelerate the industrial development of Italy. As soon as Volterra arrived in the University of Rome in 1900, he was invited to give the inaugural address for the new academic year entitled "On the Attempts to Apply Mathematics to the Biological and to the Social and Economic Sciences," which demonstrated his great interest for applied mathematics to these sectors, as well as his interest to develop a science-based industry. This interest put him in touch with the new technocratic milieu emerging in Rome under Prime Minister Giovanni Giolitti. In 1903, Volterra was one of the 3 members of the commission appointed by Giolitti to study the establishment of a polytechnical school in Turin, a significant experience for education on the level of pure and applied research. Then, in 1905, he was granted a senatorship for his new role as a policymaker in the field of scientific research. In 1906, he founded the Italian Society for the Advancement of Science, ISAS, on the model of analogous sodalities existent in more advanced countries as England. Its fourth Congress was held in Parma in September 1907, and Volterra's address clearly set forth 2 essential points. 1. The relationship between the scientific and education community, politics, and economic development. 2. The desire to overcome the limits of hyperspecialization and to promote crossing interdisciplinary boundaries. A conjoint congress at the same time and at the same place was organized by Federico Enriquez from the University of Bologna as the second meeting of the Italian Philosophical Society, which he had founded in 1906 in order to bring together philosophy and mathematics and to provide a suitable scientific and educational training for teachers. Enriquez, like Volterra, believed in a unified vision of culture and so ranked counter-rise to the philosophers Benedetto Croce and Giovanni Gentile, the key figures of Italian neo-idealism at that time. They tended to devaluate science, recognizing in it only a practical and instrumental function and separating it from the world of culture. In 1907, Enriquez founded the international journal called Scientia. It was aimed at opposing the exaggerated specialization in the field of science and at putting an end to the hegemony of literary historical studies and, last but not least, to update the Italian cultural panorama, giving circulation to progressive scientific theories as, for example, the theory of relativity. For this, Enriquez was able to count on the collaboration of well-known scholars, including Guido Castelnuovo, Tullio Levi-Civita, and Albert Einstein himself. The aim of this journal was similar to the aim of Volterra's project of the Italian for the Advancement of Science, with the difference that the project was more concentrated toward the world of technology and industry. Within the Italian Society for the Advancement of Science, Volterra set up the Italian Oceanographic Committee, which was an institution created in 1909 to promote physical, chemical, meteorological, and biological studies, particularly for the fishing industry of the Mediterranean Sea area. The committee also studied the upper atmosphere. Later, on the onset of the First World War, upper atmosphere studies continued under Volterra guidance for military reasons. Soon, the Oceanographic Committee became internationalized in 1914 with the birth of the International Commission for the Scientific Exploration of the Mediterranean, headed by Prince Albert of Monaco and later by Volterra himself. Both the creation of the Italian Society for the Advancement of Science and the institution of the Oceanographic Committee showed Volterra's goals to begin experimental laboratories that connected pure research to applied research. He felt the need for a large national laboratory like the one in Teddington, England, that Volterra had visited in 1900. But actually, he was more attracted to the ongoing developments in the USA model that showed a way of close cooperation between industrial interests and educational and scientific institutions in that country. Volterra studied this model very well. He had close contacts with the American astronomer George Ellery Hale, who was a leader in the American scientific community in the development of a science-based industry. Actually, Volterra and Hale were both dealing with a similar set of institutional problems in their respective countries. They aimed at the common goal of establishing a cooperative institutional environment between the scientific community, the government, and the industry, even though there was a big difference between a country already with a strong corporate industrial system as the USA and Italy, which was at the time a latecomer to industrial development. The First World War coincided with the promotion of scientific research in the technical and military fields in many countries. In 1914, there had been an intense political-cultural debate at a government level as to whether Italy should enter the war. Senator Vito Volterra was involved and stated his stand against neutrality and in favor of an alliance with France and England against Austria and Germany. Italy entered the war, and in first person, Volterra entered the Air Force using his scientific and technological skills in inter-allied cooperation. While Guido Castelnuovo and Federico Enriquez were not involved in first person in the war, they agreed ideologically with Volterra that German expansionistic tactics were barbaric and criminal. All three condemned the German scientific community, which backed these aggressive policies and broke the unity of what at the time was the international science community. Tullio Levi-Civita, on the other hand, asserted his neutrality and pacifist tendencies, thus cooling his relationship with Volterra. In 1917, Volterra founded and was appointed director of the Invention Office of the Ministry for Weapons and Munitions, an office analogous to those created in other Allied countries. Soon, this important connection with the Allied intercooperation, and particularly with Hale, inspired Volterra to extend the activity of this office to the civilian fields, in order to provide scientific and technical expertise for the industrial development of Italy in peacetime. To the end of 1918, Volterra, as a director of the renamed Invention and Research Office, worked with Hale and other foreign colleagues in the foundation of the International Research Council, nowadays the International Council of Scientific Unions, and Volterra became its vice president. This council was established in 1919 to enforce scientific and technological research in each member country, which then set up their own National Research Council, and all of them were directly financed by their respective governments because the initiative proved extremely innovative in the ambit of the research system. In 1923, Volterra founded the Italian National Research Council, NRC, resulting from the decisions of the International Research Council and from a further transformation of the Inventions and Research Office. Volterra was elected president. Within the NRC, Volterra's main goal was to create a great national laboratory outside the university to study the problems of pure research as well as technical and industrial application, and to coordinate the efforts of Italian researchers in many fields. But this project was blocked by university professors who saw this great laboratory as a competitor to their own university laboratories for governmental funding. Thus, they stopped Volterra's project. After the war, Volterra's institutional career reached a certain peak, and he wanted to reinforce the quality of teaching and research in mathematics at the University of Rome. With this aim, Tullio Levi-Civita and Federico Enriquez arrived in Rome, where Guido Castelnuovo had already been teaching. By now, Rome had become an international center for mathematicians, and Enriquez's and Volterra's circles of university professors was in the vanguard of mathematics. Volterra's circle events exemplify the post-unification rise of Italian mathematics, its prominence in the first quarter of the 20th century, and its precipitous decline under Fascism. I'm sorry, can I have a bit of water? Sorry. In 1922, Fascism came to power in Italy. In the beginning, the Fascist Party was legitimatized by the king and became a part of the Italian parliament. Volterra was an outspoken opponent of fascism, but, like many other members of the liberal establishment, he did not question the legitimacy of a government appointed by the king. In 1923, he joined a handful of other senators and university professors in voicing strong objections to the new reform rules in the field of education that Minister Giovanni Gentile imposed during the Mussolini government. The reform's central points were the devaluation of mathematics and science according to the principles of neo-idealistic ideology and the restriction of the autonomy of education at all institutional levels. The new educational system was organized in a rigidly centralistic way, and elective representatives were abolished, and all of the offices were to be appointed by the minister. The Italian National Academy, named Lincei, presided at that time by Volterra, opposed the reform and reacted by appointing a commission to study its dangerous effect, and had among its members Guido Castelnuovo. Minister Gentile himself replied to this opposition, accusing them of being a part of the conservative sectarian environment which refused to recognize that the country's cultural rebirth was one of the most important issues of the Mussolini government. Between 1924 and 1925, Volterra realized that fascism was changing into a dictatorial regime. With the murder of the socialist member of parliament Giacomo Matteotti, who had denounced fascism, Volterra joined the Union of Liberal and Democratic Forces in casting a vote of no confidence to Mussolini as head of the government. However, more than 200 senators gave their blessing to the party in power, and the king confirmed the connivance with fascism. In this period, Gentile had the idea of creating a fascist Academy of Arts and Sciences, named Accademia d'Italia, to serve as a counterbalance to the anti-fascist tendencies of the Lincei, which Volterra presided. But Gentile did not stop there. He further appealed to Italian intellectuals for their support to fascism in a manifesto which many intellectuals signed. Philosopher Benedetto Croce, who was liberal and democratic in politics, replied with his own manifesto, which advocated the acceptance of a universal culture not confined to a particular political system, nor the preeminence of politics over culture. Croce's manifesto was signed by Volterra, Castelnuovo, and Levi-Civita, along with other members of the Italian intellectual elite. These two manifestos provided a list of loyal and disloyal intellectuals. The Croce Manifesto signatories were all considered to be dangerous anti-fascist and enemies of the regime. Fascism tried to solve this problem with the Mussolini proclamation that, quote, all cultural institutions must become fascist, end quote, and this is exactly what happened. In 1926, Mussolini responded to Gentile's idea and founded the Accademia d'Italia, which would have replaced the disloyal Accademia dei Lincei, which was incorporated into the Accademia d'Italia in 1939. Accademia d'Italia had the mission to, quote, promote and coordinate the Italian intellectual movement in the domain of science, humanities, and arts, to preserve its pure national character, according to the spirit and the traditions of the race, and to foster its expansion beyond the borders of the state, end quote. The Accademia d'Italia reflected a pronounced anti-Semitism, preferring Aryan and pro-fascist members. So much so, the selection of candidates for its membership ignored valid Jewish scientists such as Federico Enriquez and Tullio Levi-Civita. No Jews were ever admitted. Furthermore, in 1931, Mussolini in first person refused to award the Accademia Prize to Giuseppe Levi. Instead, Mussolini named the scientific explorer of the Himalayas and supporter of the regime, Filippo De Filippi, to receive the prize, of which he said, quote, "either Filippi or nobody else," end quote. During that time, the fascist state had started a persecution against Volterra. In 1926, it prevented his re-election as president of the Accademia dei Lincei, while he continued to be a member. It also stopped funding the National Research Council until a new president, Guglielmo Marconi, was appointed in 1927. The National Research Council was reformed and it became an organ at the service of the fascist state. In 1928, Volterra was dismissed also from the vice presidency of the International Research Council. Volterra no longer had a determining role in the Italian mathematics community. In 1931, all the university professors were ordered to take an oath of fidelity to the fascist government. Out of 1,200 university teachers, only 12 refused to swear. Volterra was one of them. For this reason, he was deprived of his university chair and placed under close policy surveillance by the direct order of Mussolini. Instead, after much hesitation and a real dilemma, Levi Civita, Castelnuovo, and Enriquez all took the oath in spite of their personal convictions. They were worried about this for quite a long time, and finally they decided that school was so important that they couldn't leave it. They loved teaching and students, and so they decided to continue to attest their democratic ideas in the classroom, and so to continue their fight within. During that time, the same oath was imposed on the members of academies and science institutions. Volterra was now dismissed even as a member of the Accademia dei Lincei, and among many other petty humiliations, mail addressed to him at the Lincei was systematically returned to sender. Volterra became an invisible man in his own country. He wrote to his old American friend George Hale in 1934, quote, "If you no longer see my name among the membership of the Accademia dei Lincei, do not think I'm dead," end quote. He reacted to this political persecution by devoting himself with renewed intensity to his scientific work. He traveled frequently to France, holding courses and conferences. It appears he never seriously considered the possibility of emigrating, though opportunities were not lacking. One positive episode in these years of scholarly banishment came in 1936, when the Vatican Science Academy, the Pontificia Accademia of Science, offered membership to Volterra with the help of Levi Civita. Volterra died in Rome in 1940 in relative silence in Italy, but acclaimed abroad. A few months later, Italy entered the Second World War. In 1938, Italian Jews suffered the humiliation of the racial laws which banned thousands of Jews from the civic rights of normal Italian citizens. At the beginning, the racial laws mandated that Jews could not attend public schools or universities, not as teachers nor as pupils. These same laws would then affect the entire Jewish community, including professionals, military officials, businessmen, shop owners, and their families. The analysis of the racial laws of 1938 requires some background. As far back as 1860, Italy extended full civil rights to Jews living within its borders. They took part in the life of the country as equal citizens, no longer subject to the restriction and banishment that had marked their century-old presence in Italy. Jews had also been patriotic and continued to behave as a citizen in the same way under fascism. Jews, like many other Italians, did not foresee the outcomes that would result from the regime's anti-Semitic tendencies. By the late 1930s, Mussolini and Hitler signed a number of friendship agreements, and Italy came under increasing pressure from Germany to follow their lead in introducing anti-Jewish legislation. Overt anti-Semitism became an official component of the fascist state in 1938, which declared that, quote, Jews do not belong to the Italian race, end quote. One of the effects of these laws was that about 100 professors were expelled from the Italian universities, and consequently the Italian mathematical community disintegrated. About 10% of the members were also excluded from the Italian Mathematical Society that Volterra had founded in 1922. Furthermore, all books written by Jewish authors were banished from schools and libraries. Publishers cancelled books written by Jews from their author catalogs. Finally, after 1938, Jewish mathematicians were underestimated in any historical writing documented their activity and contribution to scientific investigations, as if Italian mathematics was created and developed only by Aryan scientists. In 1938, Levi Civita was dismissed as a contributing editor of the German Zentralblatt für Mathematics, an important international journal of mathematics at that time. As a sign of solidarity, some members, as well as the editor, resigned from this journal. The International Mathematical was openly divided into two parts, Italy and Germany on one side, and the other countries on the other side. So the German journal lost its prestige, and another international journal was founded, the USA Mathematical Review. The international scientific community, on the other hand, continued a precious collaboration with Levi Civita in his call for help to find positions for his Jewish colleagues and students, either in South America or North America. Archives clearly document his interventions in favor of colleagues such as Leo Finzi or Guido Fubini, who obtained a position in the USA. Alessandro Terracini, Beppo Levi, and Enrico Volterra, Vito Volterra's son, were sent to Argentina. Levi Civita's death in 1941 was ignored by the Italian mathematical community. Enriquez had already been dismissed as editor of Scienza and Periodico di Matematiche, two prestigious journals, but continued writing in the Italian periodical journal under a pseudonym and also published abroad. Between 1941 and 1943, before and during the German occupation in Rome, Guido Castelnuovo organized a so-called clandestine university for banned Jewish students. He was director of it and, along with others such as Enriquez, taught there, providing an opportunity for the students to take final examinations at the Technical Institute in Freiburg, Switzerland. By 1943, there was the tragedy of the deportation of Jews. The families of our Italian Hebrew scholars went into hiding. Castelnuovo families changed its name to Cafiero and was sheltered by the mathematician Tullio Viola. The Enriquez families was hidden in a convent. Virginia Volterra, Vito's wife, found safety with friends, and Edoardo Volterra, Vito's other son, joined the resistance movement in Rome. After the war, Enriquez and Castelnuovo restored the ideals of Volterra's circles. Enriquez resumed his university teaching, and in 1945 he was involved in the new initiative by Tullio Viola and Emma Castelnuovo, Guido's daughter, in founding the Istituto Romano di Cultura Matematica. At the same time, Enriquez worked with an American expert, Carlton Worsburn, who had come to Italy by order of the temporary Allied Directorate in Rome to eliminate all traces of fascist propaganda from the Italian textbooks and produce new programs for the schools. Enriquez died in Rome in 1946. During the same years, Guido Castelnuovo was asked by the post-war government to reconstruct and renew the National Research Council and the Accademia dei Lincei. In 1946, he became president of the Lincei and at the ceremony spoke about the courage and moral integrity of his late colleague Volterra. Castelnuovo was also appointed senator of the Italian Republic as an acknowledgement of his scientific work and civil engagement. He died in Rome in 1952. Thank you.